Hi and welcome to my channel. This is Teresa's Crafty Cabana. If you watched my recent video where I jelly printed the marble or stone look, I wanted to use those prints in a card and I wanted it to be a more masculine card. I found this card design on Pinterest, so I'll show you how I found that. This card, it does stand up. It has a really interesting fold to it. It does use quite a good amount of my jelly prints, so I'm always wondering what can I use my jelly prints for, so I thought this was a good example. This is the card that I found on Pinterest. I found it on Stamped Treasures by Sherry Roth, and I typed in card folds, and then this card fold came up. It's called the Diagonal Joy Fold Card, and I'll link it in the description below in case you want to look at the instructions in a little more detail. I did freeze them here, but I'm not going to keep them on the screen. I'll go over them as I'm building my card. But basically, this is the card look design that I'm going to make today. So first, I'm just going to start by taking my cardstock. That's going to be the base of the card. I'm using kind of a gray color, although it looks kind of green, but it is really more of a gray in person. First, you'll start by cutting your 8.5 by 11 piece of paper in half. So you'll cut it at 5.5 inches and you'll be left with 5.5 by 8.5 inches. And both of these sizes should be the same. Now you're going to take and score in half at 4.25 inch. That will leave you with 4.25 by 5.5 inch folded card base. Next, we're going to create the diagonal on the front. I'm just using my Fiskars cutting tool. It has a wire down the side so I can see where my cutting blade is going to line up. So you're going to cut from the top left down to the lower right. And you're just going to line it up where that fold is, and it ends where the angle is at the bottom. So and you can see I have this little line on my cutting tool here, and that way I know it's lined up perfectly. So this is really the base of our card. So with the other half of that 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, I'm going to cut it down to 3 inches by 8 inches. So I'm starting with the 8 inches, so you're just cutting off a 1/2 inch here. And then I'm turning it, and I'm going to cut at 3 inches. So this is my 3 by 8 piece. And then you just fold this one in half, and that would score it at 4 inches. And here you can see this is the base already starting to form. So you should be able to tuck that 3-inch piece underneath the folded diagonal piece, and it should line up. Now I had cut mine a little bit larger, thinking that maybe 3 inches was going to be too small, so I went back and I made sure to cut it at 3 inches. So just so you know, 3 inches is the right measurement, and that's what it has on the instructions as well in the website that I was following. So 3 inches by 8 inches folded in half ends up being 3 by 4, and that fits perfectly over that diagonal. So here I just wanted to make sure it all lined up before I moved on. Next, I pulled out a lighter gray color. I'm going to start by cutting this piece in half. Well, not in half, it'll be cut at 5.25 inch, which is a little bit smaller than half. That would have been 5.5 inches. Then I take this piece and I cut it down at 4 inches. And I'm able to get a second piece out of this cut down at 4 inches. So these are two matching sizes, and I'll set those aside. The other side of that gray cardstock, I'm going to cut it down. I'm going to start by cutting it down at 3 3/4 inch, and then I'll flip it and I'll cut it down at 2 3/4 inch, and I'll get 2 of those out of this piece as well. You will want a ruler or a cutting tool that has 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch marks. Excuse my fingers, I was playing in the dirt and doing my gardening, so I had black mulch and it could not get it off of my fingers. So here is what the light gray is going to line up like. So you get some light gray for the inside piece and light gray for the card base. Now for this cover one, I do need to cut it in half the same way I did for the card front. So I'll do the same thing where I'm lining it up at the top left corner and then down at the bottom right corner. And that makes a really nice mat right on the front. Next I'm going to cut down a little bit of white cardstock. This is going to be cut down to 2 5/8, and you do have to count the little lines on here to get your 5/8. And you'll do that for a second one. And then the other side of it needs to measure 3 5/8. And I just use my pinky to help me count my little dashes. Once you know where 5/8 is, then you just line up both pieces at that one spot. And here I'll do the same thing to this other piece. Cutting it down at 3 5/8 inch. So that gives me 2 of them. And this is how they're going to go together. That smaller folded piece will have the white card in it, and then it'll have the gray, the 2 gray pieces. So to go on top of those gray pieces, I'm going to use my gel prints. So these are the ones from my marble gel print session. This is the one that looked more like a granite maybe, but it had some kind of gold. I think it was like a rose gold I used on this one, and the black and the white. So I'm cutting that one down to 3 7/8 by 5 inches. So I did the 5 inches first, and now I'm doing the 3 and counting out 7/8. And this piece is also going to need to be cut at a diagonal, just like I did the other 2 pieces. And here I just want to make sure it lines up and it has the mat around it, and it does. So next I'll move on to the one that looks more like marble to me, the white marble. And this one is going to be cut down at 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. First I'm cutting my paper down at the 5 1/8 mark. And then I'll flip that page over and I'm going to cut it down at the 3 7/8 inch. and that fits nicely in the inside. Now to make the sentiment for my card, I stamped out "Happy Birthday to You" and then embossed it with some black embossing powder. Then I took these little stamp sets that I got from Dollar Tree. They just kind of look like interesting little odds and ends, trinkets, I don't know. And I'm just going to take each of these little trinkety things and stamp them with my pumice stone gray, and that's in my oxide, Distress Oxide ink. So I'm just going to stamp these out. Some of them are a little bit more like postage card. This is a hot air balloon, I think. Yep. And then this one's more like a clock, a stopwatch, a car. This has like a little boat with a little ribbon underneath it. So it's a very eclectic set of just interesting things. So I thought they looked cool. This is a little book page. And then this one here is another stamp. Then I had this border that came in that stamp set, so I just bordered the "Happy Birthday to You" with this. And to finish it off, I will use the pumice stone and just blend some of this ink around the edge of this card base. Now I wanted to give it a little glitter or gold, so I'm using this two-way zig glue, and I'm basically going to outline any area that I want to have gold on this kind of sentiment card piece. So I'm lining this black outline with some of this glue. So this glue will dry. It starts out blue so you can see it, and then it will dry clear. When it dries clear, it's tacky, and so it becomes removable, but it works great for putting some gold, the adhesive-based gold leafing on top of it. So I just kind of picked some areas on my little designs here. I decided to keep all the gold leafing outside of the little banner so as not to distract from the sentiment. Once my glue had dried and it was all clear, I took a little piece of my gold foil. This is again the adhesive, the kind that adheres through adhesive. There's another kind that adheres through heat. That is not this one. I have both kinds, so if you have both kinds in your craft room, you just have to make sure you picked out the right one for this technique. And I'm just burnishing the gold foil over that, any of the edges that were kind of like sticking up where the glue was, just to make sure that the gold transfers nicely. It's really easy to do, and it really makes a nice impact on the look of this little piece. It's very nice and shiny, and it also ties in a little more with those marbled edges because I did have some golds that I used in those. Now it's time to put my card together. I'm going to start by gluing my, and this is copy paper that I had used for these Gelli prints. So I'm going to adhere my Gelli print on this first mat. I like to use wet glue because this means I can move it around a little bit before it's completely permanent. My favorite glue is the Eileen's Tacky Glue, and I have a bottle that it sits upside down, so the glue is always ready to go. Next, I'm going to glue my inside marble piece to the mat. Now I did have quite a bit of this marble left over, and I knew I was going to be covering up some of that other marble piece, so I thought I'd put a little bit of this marble on the inside part of this card. So I cut it down at the diagonal just like I had done those other pieces, and then I'll just glue it into place and it will have a nice border. Then I can glue my mat to the inside of the card base. And now we'll assemble this little card piece here. I'm going to start with the top sentiment, and I'm going to apply that with some foam tape. This is just foam tape from Dollar Tree. And then I'll line that on top of the gray mat. This one's a little trickier because I don't have the wet glue, so I can't get it to move around, so I have to be pretty precise when I'm laying it down into the center of this little card mat. And I just go by eyeballing it. And then it can be glued to the top of this little card piece. And now I can assemble the inside piece. This is where I'm going to be able to write my sentiment. So I'll start by putting down the mat centered onto the background here. And then I'll take the just plain white cardstock and I'll glue that right on top. So this is what it's looking like. So I did end up putting glue on the back of this, and I pressed it down as I was closing the card. So you close in the fold first, then this on top, and this completes the card. So here you have a really interesting look. You can see the gold that's hitting the light from that front piece that I decorated the stamping with. And in the inside, you can see it has the marble look to it. So I think this was a really fun card. It stands up, so that little angle piece comes out and it will stand. And then the other piece that's kind of tucked in front of it, it just kind of hangs out. So it's pretty cool how this card comes together. I really was wanting a diagonal for this, where I had the vision of having a dark granite color and then the white marble color together. So I think this really did capture the look that I was going for. I was able to use my Gelli Prints, and it felt good to actually have a completed project at the end. So I hope you enjoyed how this card came together, and if you're interested to put one together yourself, like I said, I did link the lady that I got the instructions from. I linked her website below, and she has the specific instructions on her blog. So yeah, I hope you've had fun following along. I didn't see a video that she had made of this, so that's why I wanted to put some instructions in this video for anyone who maybe isn't so good at reading written instructions to make a card. Then you can follow along on a video. Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Happy crafting!